Let me tell you something. Sometimes history don't change in big speeches. It don't change in broad daylight. It don't change with the world watching. Nah. Sometimes history flips upside down in silence in a moment nobody thought mattered. Sometimes the most powerful moves happen late at night, behind closed doors, when the world is asleep and a leader makes a call that shifts the entire balance of power. That's exactly what went down when Modi picked up that phone. A late night call that changed the world order forever. See, people underestimate the quiet hours. They think history is shaped in daylight with parades, summits, and handshakes. But let me break it down for you. Real power is when you don't need the spotlight, when you don't need the cameras, when you don't need applause. Real power is when you move with such conviction that the world only realizes days later what went down, and by then it's too late. That's the power India showed that night. For years, the global order was written by a handful of countries who decided they would be the referees of the world. They sat at their round tables, drew up their maps, set their rules, and told everyone else how to play the game. And for the longest time, countries like India were expected to just nod along, to be quiet, to follow instructions. But when Modi made that late night call, he wasn't asking for permission. He wasn't seeking approval. He was rewriting the rules. That phone call wasn't about small talk. It was about flipping the script. He was saying, India ain't gonna be a background player no more. India ain't gonna sit back while others dictate. From this moment on, we're setting the tempo. And let me tell you, when you've got over 1 billion people behind you, when you've got a nation with centuries of history, culture, resilience, and fire in its belly, you don't need permission to lead. You just lead. Now, what makes this moment so powerful is not just the fact that a call was made, it's what that call represented. That was a call of independence, a call of defiance, a call of destiny. It told the world India ain't the same India you think it is. This ain't the land you colonized. This ain't the country you pushed around. This is the new India, an India that builds its own tech, launches its own satellites, develops its own missiles, runs its own economy, and sets its own rules. And the world felt that call. Oh, they felt it. Let me paint this picture for you. Somewhere in Washington, alarms went off. In Beijing, brows furrowed. In London, people got nervous. In Moscow, they paid attention because they all knew this wasn't just another diplomatic chat. This was India declaring, we here now. Not next decade, not in 2050, right now. See, what shook the world wasn't just the decision it said, it was the speed, the confidence, the audacity. Because here's the truth. Most countries tiptoe around the big players. They wait for green signals. They consult 100 advisors. They fear the backlash. But India, that night India said, we ain't scared of no backlash. We've been through worse. We've survived colonization, invasions, exploitation, sanctions, and yet we rise. So if the world wants to test us now, bring it on. That's what made that call legendary. But let me tell you something deeper. What makes India so dangerous to the old powers is that it's not trying to imitate them. India ain't out here saying, we want to be the next America or the next China. No. India is saying, we are India, and that's enough. That's the difference. That's why the world shook. Because when you stand tall in your own identity, when you ain't trying to be a copy of nobody else, you become untouchable. That late night call wasn't just political, it was spiritual. It carried the weight of every farmer who wakes up before sunrise, every soldier standing guard on the border, every scientist in a lab, every child studying under a dim light, every mother who sacrifices so her children can rise higher. It wasn't one man dialing a number. It was 1.4 billion souls speaking through him. That's why it shook the world. And listen, when a nation starts believing in itself that strongly, Nothing can stop it. You can sanction them, you can try to isolate them, you can try to suppress their voice, but they'll just find another way. Because hunger always beats comfort. Resilience always beats entitlement. And India got hunger carved into its DNA. Now, some folks are scared. Let's not pretend. They won't say it out loud, but they're worried. Because for decades, the global order worked like this. The West called the shots and everybody else just reacted. But now India is making calls that others have to react to. That's a whole new game. And when the game changes, the ones who've been in control the longest are always the most uncomfortable. Let me break it down like this. Imagine a table where the same folks have been eating the feast for years. They sitting at the head of the table, carving the turkey, passing the plates, deciding who gets scraps. And India was always standing in the corner waiting for leftovers. But now India just pulled up a chair, sat down at the table and said, "Move over. We eating too." And not only that, India brought its own food to the table. Spice's the late night call proved India doesn't follow the world. It forces the world to follow India. For too long, the narrative was written in such a way that India was always portrayed as a follower, a nation that had potential but was always catching up, always standing in line behind the so-called great powers. The West used to decide the rules. China flexed its economic muscles, and Russia played its military chess game, while India was expected to simply adapt. But that night, with that single call, India shattered the illusion that it needed to fit into someone else's world order. India wasn't waiting for validation. It wasn't waiting for a seat to be offered. It was showing that the world must adjust to its presence, its decisions, its vision. That's when people realized the global script had flipped. You gotta understand, following the world is safe. Following the world is predictable. Following the world is what nations without confidence do, because they think if they just imitate the powerful, they'll become powerful. But India's late night call was different. It said clearly without hesitation that India wasn't interested in copying. India had its own rhythm, its own playbook, its own strategy, and it wasn't about to let anyone dictate how it should move. The true essence of leadership is when you stop walking in someone else's footsteps and start carving your own path. That's what India did, and the world noticed. Because when India moves now, the shockwaves ripple everywhere. When it makes a call in the middle of the night, it ain't just a bilateral conversation, it's a global earthquake. That call represented something deeper than diplomacy. It was the signal that India's time as a quiet, obedient power was over. This is an India that's not going to wait for consensus from others. It's an India that acts and then forces the rest of the world to respond. And trust me, when the rest of the world is reacting to you, that's when you know you're leading. Think about it. For decades, the world's most powerful capitals, Washington, London, Paris, Beijing, have been used to the idea that they make the decisions and the rest of the globe adjusts. But after that call, India flipped that script. Suddenly, these same capitals were holding emergency meetings, staying up at night, analyzing what India just did, trying to calculate how to position themselves in response. That is the mark of true power, not how loudly you speak, but how quickly others change their tone when you speak. India had stepped into that zone. See, when you follow the world, you're always on defense. You're reacting to sanctions, to policies, to military maneuvers, to trade wars. But when you force the world to follow you, you flip from defense to offense. You set the agenda. You decide the terms of conversation. You choose when to shake hands and when to draw lines. And what makes India so unique is that its strength doesn't just come from military might or economic growth. It comes from its ability to move with both patience and precision. That late night call wasn't reckless. It was strategic. It was bold, but it was calculated. That's why it hit so hard. Now, here's the part that scared the world the most. India didn't just make the call. It stood behind it. No backtracking, no hesitation, no excuses. That level of conviction is rare in today's world, where leaders often make bold statements but collapse under pressure. India showed that it doesn't need the world to validate its choices. It makes its moves based on what's right for its people, its future, and its vision. And when you stand that firm, others have no choice but to shift. Because deep down, every country respects conviction, even if they don't like the decision itself. The call proved something else too. India is not afraid of isolation. See, countries that fear being isolated, countries that fear losing alliances, they play soft. They compromise, they bend. But India has been through centuries of struggle, centuries of standing tall alone, centuries of learning how to thrive under pressure. That resilience is unmatched. The call said to the world, even if you all disagree, even if you all push back, we will still move forward. And eventually you will follow, because the momentum we carry cannot be stopped. That kind of courage makes others respect you, even if they wanted to resist you. It also showed the difference between power built on entitlement and power built on hunger. Many nations that once dictated the world order had grown comfortable, entitled, assuming their dominance would last forever. But comfort breeds complacency, and complacency breeds weakness. India, on the other hand, has been climbing, pushing, struggling, building brick by brick, fighting for every inch of progress. Hunger is what drives a nation to rise faster, strike sharper, and move bolder. That late night call carried that hunger. It was a reminder that while some countries were resting on old glories, India was writing new ones. Another powerful truth about that call, it wasn't just about one leader. The world may have heard one voice on the phone, but in reality, it was the voice of 1.4 billion people. Every word carried the weight of farmers in Punjab, engineers in Bengaluru, soldiers on the border, children in schools, families in villages and cities, all of them. That call wasn't personal ambition, it was collective will. And when the collective will of a billion people moves, even the greatest empires have no choice but to step aside. India forcing the world to follow doesn't mean aggression, it means leadership. There's a difference. Aggression is when you push people down. Leadership is when you move with such clarity, such strength, such purpose, that people naturally align with you. The world is watching India now not because it's bullying, but because it's showing a vision of independence, of dignity, of progress on its own terms. That's more powerful than any weapon, any sanction, any threat. That's influence. And influence is the currency of the future. What made this so transformational is that India didn't just shift its own position, it shifted the psychology of the world. Overnight, countries that used to treat India as a secondary player were forced to reframe their thinking. They had to start asking themselves, how does India's move affect us? How do we align with it? How do we avoid falling behind it? That's the measure of a true world power, when your actions become the reference point for everyone else's decisions. And don't forget, this wasn't the move of a nation that stumbled into luck. This was the move of a nation that had been preparing, building, and waiting for the right moment. Years of investment in technology